How's it going, everyone? It's Avi from Weather Sponge 5000, and we have a lot to talk about here in the United States when it comes to winter weather. Of course, we have this first storm system, which is expected to move up the northeast coast and bring major snowfall to many areas of the northeast, including some of the more populated areas of New England. However, there's still questions regarding this storm system, because if I were to continue to move forward with the forecast, you're going to see that it's going to be another one of those Interstate 95 type winter storms for the northeast. And what I mean by that is that if you're along the northeastern portion, the northwest of the Interstate 95 corridor, then you're more likely to experience major snow out of this. While if you're around the south, just to the southeast of the Interstate 95 corridor, then you're far less likely to receive any accumulating snowfall, and it'll more likely be a rain event if you're to the southeast of the Interstate 95 corridor, at least anywhere south of New York City. Throughout New England, it seems pretty certain at this time, outside of maybe the extreme coastal areas of southern New England, that it's going to be entirely a snow event, including Boston. So Boston, at this point in time, you should expect major snowfall, anywhere between 6 to 10 inches of snow, and the snowfall should be heavy at times right around Sunday morning. That's when you should expect the worst of the impacts. However, just south, I'll say, of the interstate, or I'll say just south of New York City, that's where the rain snow line becomes very, very uncertain. And it's one of those things where we're just going to have to wait and see until the actual event occurs before we can give a confident forecast right up along the Interstate 95 corridor in New York City. Because if you were to only go 10 miles to the west in one location, that could mean the difference between receiving no snowfall or receiving 8 inches of snowfall, which is certainly such a big gap for such a small area, as it's going to be one of those events here. Really all depends on where that rain snow line will be right around northern New Jersey, New York City, and even areas sort of southward into southeastern Pennsylvania. However, for cities like Baltimore and Washington, D.C., I'm more confident that it's mostly going to be a rain event. I find it a little bit more difficult at this time that we're going to see the snow move southwest and east enough to where you guys would experience accumulating snowfall. That's still a possibility. We can't rule it out, but at this point in time, it seems like the computer models are pretty much as certain as you can ask when it comes to this forecast. They're nearly taking, both the GFS and the European model are nearly taking the exact same trajectory, bringing snowfall to the exact same areas, and the strength is nearly identical between the two. So that makes the forecast as certain as you can ask for something that's 48 hours out. The thing is that this is a snowstorm with a rain snow line that could vary between several miles, and that could be huge in determining how much snowfall you receive if you're right up along the rain snow line, and which would be in places like New York City, northeastern New Jersey as well, southeastern Pennsylvania, and just to the northwest of Washington, D.C. and Baltimore. So it's going to be one of those events. But for the areas like Pennsylvania, for central Pennsylvania, southern upstate New York, and like I said, much of southern New England, it's pretty confident at this point it'll be entirely a snow event, so you need to prepare accordingly. However, for those areas like northeastern New Jersey and New York City, like I said, you definitely need to pay close attention till the very last second as the storm system approaches to see where that rain snow line will be. But I'll still recommend for northern New Jersey to prepare for potentially a significant snowstorm, because you never know. Like I said, any small variation in the forecast could mean the difference between receiving no snow or 8 inches of snowfall. So definitely keep that in mind throughout northern New Jersey as well as New York City. However, when it comes to the current forecasts for snowfall, so if we were to take a look at what the GFS model is currently forecasting for the Northeast, we're going to take a look at the total snowfall depth forecast, because that's a better indicator of how much snow will actually stick onto the surface. Because using the typical 1 inch, 1 inch of rain equates to 10 inches of snow ratio as a forecast estimate isn't as accurate, because every snowstorm is different and every ratio when it comes to precipitable rainfall to snowfall is different in every snowstorm. So there's a better representation of what the GFS model is expecting. And we do see some areas receiving over 6 inches of snowfall. I do believe where you will see more snowfall on the surface than this. But we see that in New York City, it's going to be a very close forecast. Right now, New York City isn't forecasted to receive accumulating snowfall, but don't be surprised if that changes a lot over the next 48 hours, because the trajectory could easily move to the west. Northwestern New Jersey, you should expect anywhere between 3 to 6 to 6 to 8 inches of snowfall. The further westward you go, the more snowfall you receive. Right around Patterson as well as Hackensack, New Jersey, that's where the forecast definitely becomes very, very difficult. So definitely stay tuned for updates. But Hartford, Boston, expect anywhere from 6 to 12 inches of snowfall. Don't ignore what the GFS model is stating right here. It should be higher than what it's stating, because if we were to take a look at the European model, it gives a little bit of a better representation of how much snowfall you should see. Of course, this is a 1 inch of rain equates 10 inches of snow ratio, so expect a little bit less snow than what you see right here. But look at this. The European model, however, what's interesting is that in its latest run, does lean a little bit more towards the snowfall being a little bit further southward, impacting New York City, which is why I say New York City, you're not out of the woods just yet when it comes to snowfall. And same goes for other areas right up along the rain snow line who might be just south of the Interstate 95 corridor. So definitely stay tuned for updates. But yeah, definitely prepare throughout the Northeast for this snowstorm. However, when it comes to our next major winter storm that could impact the Midwest this time and the more populated areas of the Midwest as well, because if I were to continue to move forward with the snowfall forecast from the European model, look at how much snowfall we see over the Midwest. We see a large area of 6 12 inches of snowfall, as it's expected that multiple snowstorms should actually move through the Midwest, not only as we approach next week, but potentially for the next few weeks, as we're going to see a pattern shift where it's going to be much colder than average throughout the eastern half of the United States. So let me show you guys the European model's forecast when it comes to this next potentially major Midwest snowstorm. And by the way, the snow won't be the only thing that you're going to need to worry about with this storm system, because there could also be extreme rain threat, especially for the east coast of the United States, which is definitely a concern, because right up along many areas of the east coast, the ground is already pretty saturated from the past few rainstorms that we've been seeing in the Northeast. And like I was and back just right around the Christmas time frame, I was reporting here in northern New Jersey, and some areas received the worst flooding since Hurricane Irene in 2011. So to add potentially even more rain on top of that with another major rainstorm moving through could cause another major flood threat for many areas along Northeast, which is definitely a concern for you guys, because look at how much rainfall we see in the European model's forecast. This is just extremely, extremely heavy rainfall that is certainly capable of bringing flash flooding, especially in areas where the surface is already oversaturated. So you definitely need to be aware of that throughout the Northeast, of the next potential flood threat that could happen right around the midweek. And while the forecast is somewhat far out, I wouldn't say it's that far out to make it to the point where it's a guess, but it's certainly decently far out to where changes could be made. While it's decently far out, both the European model and the GFS model are fairly confident when it comes to the trajectory and the strength of this storm system, and they're nearly identical, which makes me believe that the forecast right now is pretty certain when it comes to where exactly the storm system will go and how strong it'll be and what impacts you'll see right around the Midwest, because we clearly see very heavy snowfall throughout Kansas. This will develop off the Pacific Northwest coast, and there's going to be plenty of cold air behind it. Of course, we have a ridge just off the California coast, which typically stays there year-round, which is why the West Coast is typically so dry. But that's going to help induce a strong pressure gradient for the north, for a northwesterly flow to move through the western half of the United States and force the cold air to interact with this very warm air mass that's located right around the Gulf Coast, and this ridge will only amplify that, as a ridge is expected to develop once this first winter storm from the northeast moves out. Let me show you guys the 500 millibar height, and allow me to show you what I'm exactly talking about. So if we were to take a quick look at that, you're going to see that we're going to see this northeast snowstorm move through. It seems pretty certain at this time the ridge, this ridge will be at least somewhere around the ballpark when it comes to this strength. But any small differences in the strength of this ridge could make a big difference in terms of snowfall if you live in an area where the rain snow line will be close in proximity to you guys. So we definitely need to pay close attention to how strong this ridge is. But beyond that point, let me go back to the Midwest snowstorm. We see that right after the storm system moves out, we see a ridge develop in the right around the eastern half of the United States. And what will determine the strength of this ridge is actually the strength of this storm. If this storm system actually becomes stronger, you might be thinking that that would weaken the ridging, but in fact, it'll help strengthen the ridging, because the stronger this storm is, the more lift we see and the more outflow aloft we see, for it to strengthen the amount of sinking air just outside the storm system, which would allow this ridge to strengthen just to the west of this storm. So the stronger this storm is, the stronger this ridge will be, since it'll be able to force a jet stream further northward, and that will also only amplify the strength of this storm system, and that'll determine the trajectory, because if this ridge is stronger, then of course we should expect a northward track a little bit earlier. But if this ridge ends up being a little weaker thanks to a weaker storm system by the time it approaches the northeast, then we should see the opposite happen. This storm becomes weaker, moves slightly a bit more to the east, and that would mean the places in the east would have a higher shot of receiving snowfall. But at this point in time, it seems like the computer models are pretty identical when it comes to the trajectory. We're going to need to see if that keeps up. This forecast is still certainly subject to change, but it makes me confident that this forecast will at least be around the ballpark. So if this forecast actually does come for fruition, which I think is the most likely scenario, or at least somewhere that's at least close to this scenario, what should you expect in the Midwest? So if we were to move forward, we see that the snow will develop right around Kansas. We do see some thunderstorm activity right around the southeast. I wouldn't rule out the possibility of a severe weather threat in the southeast for states like Louisiana, Arkansas, Mississippi, potentially as well. But in the north, we see that this storm's pressure is around 994 millibars, and wind should be another concern with this storm system as well. But we do see the area of snow expands. This impacts the bigger cities of the Midwest as well, like Kansas City gets involved with heavy snowfall, potentially around 5 to 8 inches of snowfall. Omaha gets involved. Chicago gets involved with some snowfall as well. Des Moines gets involved, and even St. Louis could get involved on the backside of this storm system when it comes to snowfall. And in terms of the areas further eastward, maybe Detroit could get involved with some very heavy snowfall. The good news is that it'll eventually change over to rain, which should certainly help melt the snow and create less havoc on the roads in the Detroit area and many areas in Michigan in general. But you still need to be aware of that by the time we approach the Tuesday timeframe. And we could see some snow in some portions of the northeast as well, but it'll mainly be relegated to the higher elevations and in the interior portions of the northeast. So this won't necessarily be a coastal northeast threat when it comes to snowfall, but the extreme higher elevations of New Hampshire, Vermont, and the Adirondacks could experience extreme snowfall from this storm system, and same goes for the northern portion of Maine before it eventually changes over to rain, since the southeast winds will be quite strong. But look at the pressure of this storm by the time it approaches the northeast. 966 millibars, which would make it definitely a concern when it comes to strong gusty winds, as a 966 millibar storm system would be equivalent to a category 2 hurricane if it were the hurricane season. So this storm is quite powerful. You definitely need to prepare for power outages in some areas in the northeast, especially in the higher elevations, as And of course, the biggest threat will be snowfall, where a large area of 6 to 12 inches could fall in right around the Midwest. So this is a European models scenario, but you're going to see the GFS model is pretty much nearly exactly identical. So here's the GFS model's latest run. Let's go to the 18Z run, and you're clearly going to see that there's going to be plenty of snow here right around the Midwest by the time we approach the Tuesday to Wednesday timeframe. So definitely keep that in mind throughout the Midwest. So here's my overall snowfall forecast for these next two snowstorms moving through. We first have this northeast snowstorm. So like I said, 6 to 12 inches over the southern New England, southern upstate New York, central Pennsylvania, northwestern New Jersey, and northwestern Virginia, Maryland, as well as West Virginia. Should expect 6 to 12 inches of snowfall, so definitely prepare for a major threat. But look at how close that rain snow line will be right over New York City and northeastern New Jersey, southeastern Pennsylvania, and just the northwest of Washington, D.C. and Baltimore. I am more confident it'll be more of a rain event for those two cities and Philadelphia. But for New York City, it could be a little bit closer. I wouldn't rule out the possibility of accumulating snowfall just yet. Right now, the forecast is that there won't be any snowfall accumulation in New York City, but don't rule out the possibility that maybe you could see it with if we do see a shift in the forecast. But I'm taking a look back at the Midwest. This is the current forecast. It certainly is subject to change. We're still 5 days out, but with the computer models in good agreement, then we should be it should be fairly more confident that at least this forecast will at least remain around the ballpark of what we'll actually see. So that's it for now, guys, and I thank you guys for watching. Make sure to like if you do enjoy this video, and I hope you guys have a great day.